because Pride was yesterday, and that really is one of the biggest, if not the biggest days of the year for the CVUU, I knew that I would need to work ahead. So I wrote what was supposed to be popsicles and carnivals and sprinkler sermon when it was over 100 degrees. And I was not feeling in a summer vibe. I was feeling hot and concerned and a little angry. There's actually a lot of research that says that heat makes people angry. Violent crime goes up during heat waves. It's not good for us physically. So I'm afraid that this cozy summer sermon, it's not what I thought it would be. Today's message is Golden Days, summer in the Midwest. It's been a tradition or maybe even a habit of mine to preach seasonal sermons. Cozy winter sermons about hibernation, spring sermons about new life, and fall sermons about the cycles that define our lives. And of course, there's always a joyous summer sermon about the blessing of summer in Iowa, a sermon celebrating the best of the Midwest, summertime. I know that I've lived in Iowa, moved here in 2014, 2015, and I've come in the habit. I used to really love wintertime, mostly from February on, just pining for summertime. June through August in the Midwest, we tend to come alive in a way that we simply can't afford to expend energy when it's 60 below zero with wind chill in February. So I wanted to deliver this message of summer fun, swimming and hiking and picnicking. But this last week, it was too hot to do much of anything. You know, that's what they say when it gets so hot. You really just have to sort of lie very still and wait for it to pass. All week long, I was nearly compulsively checking the weather forecast. And the high on Saturday, on about Sunday, Monday, was predicted to be 86 degrees. And then it went down a few degrees as the week went on with a high of 83 or 84. And my partner doesn't use language like this, but they described it as a blessing because we knew that we were going to do Pride when it wasn't over 100 degrees. So we did get a break. I'm feeling it was 64 degrees when I went out of the house this morning. I'm feeling a little better, but another heat wave's coming, right? The heat, which has plagued much of this country oppressively for months, is likely only going to get worse. There's a meme that's been traveling around social media lately, and it's a mother sort of leaning down and she's talking to her little girl, and she says, "Don't complain about the heat, sweetie. This is likely the coldest summer of your life." Right? Really sobering thought. Finally, it seems the media has given up the ghost. They are ringing the alarm bells of climate change. NPR has been repeating human caused climate change all summer. Several times a day, NPR seems to report a story about the impacts of climate change, stories about rescuing and restoring coral in coral farms in Florida because the ocean is too hot for these biological wonders to survive. Stories of the hurricanes in California. There hasn't been hurricane-like weather in California in 30, 40, 50 years, unprecedented weather. And of course, these tremendous fires in Hawaii that we continue to hear about the casualties and the impact of. For us in our home in Dysart, memories of the derecho of 2020 are never far from our mind. That was such a horrible time for myself and all of our neighbors, and summer comes around and we sort of just simmer in anxiety waiting for the next big weather event. And finally, also, NPR is reporting on the lack of political will to do anything about climate change and the ways that our capitalist economy really has no interest in sort of saving us from climate change. It's just not how the system was designed. So I'm fighting not to lose hope. And lately I've been fighting, to do much of anything at all because it's so hot. News outlets are also reporting on what they're calling climate anxiety, the growing sense of dread among common folks as they look towards a future with a world climate we cannot fathom and have no idea yet how to survive and adapt within. Ellen Berry, writing for the New York Times, reports eco-anxiety, a concept introduced by young activists, has entered a mainstream vocabulary. And professional organizations are hurrying to catch up, exploring approaches to treating anxiety that is both existential and, many would argue, rational. The field's emergence has met resistance for various reasons. Therapists, of course, have been trained to keep their own views out of their practices. And many leaders in mental health maintain that anxiety over climate change is no different clinically from anxiety caused by other societal threats like terrorism or school shootings. But some climate activists, meanwhile, are leery of viewing anxiety over a climate as dysfunctional thinking to be soothed or worse, cured. I wing back and forth between despair and helplessness and hope and anger at the state of things, and I know that I'm not alone in these feelings. My father often preached beloved community by reminding folks to check on their neighbors. When it grew especially hot, he would often at the very end of church with his benediction sort of, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and knock on your neighbor's door this afternoon. Check in, bring a bottle of Gatorade or a glass of lemonade and invite, your elderly neighbor to come sit a spell in your air-conditioned living room, that kind of thing. In just the last week, I've observed some really awesome hospitality among folks at the CVUU as we all contend with this heat. We're drawing a kind of comfort from commiseration. It's a way to quell our dread and take our minds off the temperature for a moment. I've preached quite a bit, and I'm sure I'll preach again very soon about the way that American culture has individualized us to such a degree that communal relationship we're sort of out of practice. We don't quite know how to behave like a little community among our neighbors. One of the examples of this that I hear a lot is the idea of a lawnmower, right? Everyone on your block more than likely owns their own lawnmower, right? Which if you think about it, that's a little silly. Why don't we, as a block, if 6 or 8 neighbors went in and they bought a lawnmower and they had a schedule and you all communally owned this lawnmower, well, it might actually, if everybody did it, have an impact on emissions, potentially. It would be a cost-saving measure. Our lawnmower broke earlier this summer, and Skylar spent weeks and weeks and weeks determined to fix it. And they did. It took like 3 months, but they fixed the lawnmower. And during this time, neighbors of ours would be like watching Skylar, our neighbor who lives right across from us, would be watching Skylar tinkering with this lawnmower, and offering help. And at one point, our neighbor who lives right next door sent his 12-year-old son to just mow our lawn. He just said, Jackson, get off the couch, go mow Skylar and Emma's yard. And he did. And we like looked out, the window, and there's Jackson mowing our lawn. It was so sweet. And after he was done, we gave him $20. And his younger brother was out riding his bike a day or two later, and he said, Jackson said you gave him money when he mowed your lawn. No labor is free. Of course we did. Someday when you're big enough, we'll give you $20 to mow our lawn. But we're out of practice with this kind of communal behavior, community behavior. It's not ingrained in Americans, but I think, we see it when crises happen. And there's this huge upswell of volunteer support and community togetherness. But I think we could do that all the time. And if we did that all the time, we might feel a little more prepared to deal with some of these catastrophic, unprecedented weather events. It's a community problem. Climate change is, even more than it is a personal problem. It's also mostly a big business problem. Absolutely. I feel a fair degree of skepticism regarding like individual carbon footprints and individual responsibility. Sometimes I think that's kind of a pass off. The example that comes up a lot, and this makes me so mad. These alerts in New York City, your kids probably get these all the time. These alerts will go out in New York City asking people to limit their use of electricity. Turn your lights off, turn your AC off during these times. Well, meanwhile, all of the lights in Times Square are on. And people that live in New York think, well, what is turning my kitchen light off going to do when all of Times Square is lit up 24 hours a day? So that's when I start to get, I just start to feel like it's a pass off. But individual actions often help make us feel better. And we have each other, and we can take small actionable steps on our own. It's kind of a way to feel like we're in control, because so much of this feels like it's totally out of our control. But you can control what you recycle. You can control what lights you have on in your house. And collectively, big picture collectively, and this is something we would all do well to remember all the time, we are so powerful if we're all together. We're more powerful than any billionaire out there. Without our money, those guys are toast. And just once in my lifetime, I'd really like to see a true collective general strike. I think it would change things immediately if we all just sort of said, you know what, the system is broken and we're going to not participate anymore. In 24 hours, we'd have higher wages and better benefits and blah, blah, blah. Ilana Glazer, who's half of the iconic series Broad City, was quoted on a recent episode of a podcast called Betches News, Betches, Betches, proudly exclaiming how fully out of touch with humankind billionaires are. She's speaking specifically about the SAG-AFTRA strike, but her words resonate deeply with the full problem of billionaires driving the destruction of humanity for the sake of their own wealth. And she says, they're so far off from what humanity is. These billionaires do not move their bodies among people. They do not travel next to people. They do not sweat near other people. They literally do not understand what is happening. And I'm angry, but actually, they're so weak-minded. These billionaires want to go to space. Go. We don't need them to spiritually or intellectually get there. We just need them to agree to our negotiations. The people who are driving our collective demise are fully out of touch with the day-to-day reality of this living world. And like Glazer says, we don't need billionaires to reach the full capacity of human thriving. In fact, I think we'd actually be a lot closer to our collective thriving if billionaires were not allowed to exist, because they shouldn't. No one in this world needs $1 billion. And obviously, having $1 billion is detrimental to individual capacity for human healthy behavior. And you get that much money and something fundamentally breaks inside of you, or your soul is traded or something. As Glazer says, all we need from billionaires is for them to agree to our demands. And collectively, our demands are potently powerful. And so let's start making some demands. So the long and short of it, it's hot. It's hot. And who knows what natural disaster will befall us next. And so often the problems of the world, they feel too big and too catastrophic to even fathom themselves, let alone think about how to solve them, especially by yourself. But there are always small, actionable steps. And those small, actionable steps, maybe they're a drop in the bucket, but they do help us ground ourselves in action. You know, one of the things that these climate therapists talk about is how so many folks, especially Western folks that have a lot of privilege, right? There was at the climate summit in France, there was a young climate activist quoted, because after this summit, it was so disappointing. What they voted on was further discussion, while humanity is crumbling around them. And what she said was, it's impossible to solve climate change from an air-conditioned room. And so that's what these therapists are saying about Westerners that have all of this climate anxiety. We're pretty far removed from the problem. Even though it's been really hot, I've spent this last week in relative comfort because of my privilege, and my militant partner who closes all the curtains and monitors the thermostat. And they got really upset on Wednesday. It hit over 70 degrees in our house, and it might as well have been 100 degrees. Skylar was so disappointed. We're very privileged. We're very lucky. We were so comfortable. So here are, some small steps. Sometimes taking one small step is what shakes us out of our existential paralysis. And that's what I was saying about these climate therapists that they observe in Western folks. It's a lot of like spinning our wheels, right? It's a lot of just that like cycle that gets you stuck. And you can spend a lot of time doom scrolling or just panicking about what the world is going to be like. And the shift is to do something. The shift is to take that anxiety and do something. Plant a garden. Plant a plant, just buy a few house plants and take care of them. You don't have to go big, plant an herb garden, plant some mint in your backyard, and you'll have mint. Your grandchildren will have mint. Drive less. Buy everything you can secondhand. Share your lawnmower with your neighbor. Focus on renewable resources. Focus on producing less waste. This article talks about this woman, the article that I was quoting, how she has this image of she gets to the gates of heaven, and piled over the gates of heaven is every, piece of plastic and non-biodegradable thing she ever collected in her life. And that put a real image in my mind. Oh, goodness. Wouldn't that be horrible? So produce less waste. Give in less frequently to the voice in our heads that tell us that consumption will make us feel better. That's a really quick fix, going out and buying something. But most importantly, I really believe this is the most important thing that you can do. Check on your neighbors. Check on your neighbors. Make sure everyone in your circle is okay. Ask for help if you aren't okay. No one is coming to save us. We are coming to save us. We take care of us. We really, truly are all in this fight together. So let's take care of us. Amen and blessed be.